Explorers and searchers, legends and splats. You are now tuned in to the Disneyholics show.
Hello and welcome to the Disneyholics show. That's Mike TV.
And that's Jen Diz.
It is Patreon Takeover Month, and we have another topic to cover. This week, we will be watching and reviewing Disney's Strange World, an animated sci-fi adventure film that we missed in the theaters. All right, first and foremost, I am here to apologize for the sound of my voice because I am sick once again. I don't know what is going on with my life, but I'm just always sick at this point. So this is going to probably be a little shorter of an episode than our normal. So bear with me here. Thanks,
It's
Mike, for
it's kind of that
jumping
time
on
of year.
early.
Everybody be healthy, be well.
Yeah, I used to just do so much better through these times than I have recently, but it is what it is.
Is what it
Not feeling
is.
my hottest right now, for sure. But I also wanted to say before we get started, happy Valentine's Day. This episode
Oh,
comes out
yeah.
on Valentine's Day tomorrow.
It
So,
is
well,
Feb
for us tomorrow.
14th.
Yep.
Do you have any is that what they call it now? Galentine's Day plans? Like friends hang out?
I did until I feel like this. So, no,
Oh,
I'm not leaving my house likely, but
fair
I
enough.
was going to take my bestie out on a date, but that's not happening now. So,
Oh, you could postpone it for
yeah,
another.
we'll have a makeup Valentine's Day, and I'm probably gonna do something dumb like order one of those Mountain Mike's heart-shaped pizzas or something. Call it a day.
Ooh, I will just be on a flight, so I'm not doing anything eventful either. It is what it is.
Yeah, well, hopefully everyone has a lovely Valentine's Day, however you end up celebrating it. If you do, if you don't, if you do something silly, whatever it is, have a good one.
Yeah, and there
Um,
there are other things to celebrate just on Tuesday, right? Big announcements.
yeah, so I just wanted to say this real quick because it's just brand new news. Tiana's Bayou Adventure. We all knew, I think they were always saying late 2024, right?
Yeah,
But they've now announced for Disney World at least is coming summer of 2024. I was pretty impressed. I was like, okay, they've been hearing our qualms about them taking forever to do stuff, maybe. So they're like, look, we're going to surprise them. We're
I
going to
love
set their
it.
expectations for the end of the year and then surprise them with the summertime announcement. So that's pretty exciting.
Definitely earlier than I anticipated.
Right. Yeah. And did
And
you see the video that came out?
I did. I wasn't sure if I wanted to see the animatronic spoiler, but I said, F it. I want to see it. And yes, I watched it.
I like saw it pop and I scrolled real fast. You know how I normally do. I'm like, yes,
Yeah.
get out of my face. But it was exactly what I was expecting it to be. It's going to be that same technology from like Beauty and the Beast, where those newer, beautiful animatronics that look like they're plucked right out of the cartoon.
Beautiful.
It's so
And they
good.
somehow like it's still a physical face, no digital, but the eyes are somehow like backlit and they look so cool. Like it's just really
Yeah.
beautiful. And if anybody else watched it and you're worried about spoilers, the good thing is this is one of many animatronics they announced. So there's
Mm-hmm.
audio animatronics for Lewis the gator, Mama Odie, I think several Tianas. So we have plenty to be surprised with if we hopefully get on that ride this year, when it opens.
Pretty crazy. I thought that was really exciting just to see, wow, it's going to be here earlier than we were expecting instead of later, which is usually the news, right?
Also, my theory is it's going to either be the week before, during, or after D23 Expo in California.
Ooh,
Like just to spread it out a little bit. I feel like that's happened to us once before and we were like really stressed out. I forgot what it was. There was like something that started, but it was on the other coast and it was
what
near
if they end up
D23.
getting Disneyland's open early and then they could hand out those special tickets like they did with Fantasmic? Remember that?
Ooh, that would be nice. They did start
Oh my
working on Disney
gosh.
World first. So I can
Yeah.
see why. Yeah.
Yeah, I think they
Very
had like a
cool. Very cool.
2 month jump on us, maybe even. So
Yep.
we'll see.
We were the
Um,
opposite, I think, for Rise, right?
Mm-hmm.
We as in Disneyland.
Yes.
We,
Yeah.
yeah, very
So
cool.
crazy. So yeah, that's the only news. You have any other news updates that
No,
you've
that's the
caught?
one thing that really got me excited, and it was unexpected. So,
Yes, totally unexpected. Exciting. All right, so let's jump straight in. We have another Patreon takeover topic. This one fit perfectly into my vibe this week of being sick as hell. I could just like lay in bed and watch a movie. So thanks to Jessica for suggesting that we watch and review Strange World. I had not seen it yet, and Mike had not either, right, Mike?
correct.
So my question is, why didn't we see it in movie theaters?
So my initial thought was it was a time when there was just a lot of stuff coming out that was very, very similar. And the trailers for all of those things really didn't help Strange World. So there was this one time where there was trailers for Avatar World of Water. What is it called? Way of Water. Avatar Way of Water. And then Quantumania, Ant-Man, and then Strange World. And they all have almost the same exact aesthetic when they're in
Yeah.
their like strange world, I guess. And I was like, I've had enough of it. I don't need it. And then the trailers for this just didn't seem that exciting. I didn't really understand totally what it was about. And the other part was, I'm getting kind of, I'm never as excited about Walt Disney animated films from the studios that are not musicals. That sounds very specific, but I tend to skip over those or wait till it comes on streaming or whatever the case is. So I'd say I think that those are my reasons. What about you?
Um, totally similar. Nothing about it got me excited. I feel bad to say that, but like I just I couldn't really like I don't know, there's so many other films coming out by Disney at the time that were like a little more important. Like even Turning Red was like had
Yeah,
like an actual real life message to it versus this one that's just like kind of imaginative. So I kind of lean towards those films over this one. And then you're exactly right. I wrote that in my notes too. Like there's so many films that this felt like at the same
yeah,
time that I was like, I could skip. It's kind of how I was starting to feel about multiverse, right? There's like these
yes,
patches of movies coming out all at the same time with the same vibe and theme, and it's like, okay, I don't need to
totally.
see that one.
And for
Um,
some context of time, Strange World came out in November of 2022. So we were only 2 years into the pandemic in a way where we weren't sure what was going to theaters, what was going direct to streaming, how soon it would go from theaters to streaming. So like if you weren't super excited about something, we weren't going to the theater to watch a movie.
Right. Yeah, I was definitely picking choosing what I was still going out for at the time. I think I still am. That's what COVID did to me was like really make me like pick my battles, right? Um, but also just the idea of it coming out on streaming is kind of like I don't feel the urge or the rush to see it either because it's so
Yeah.
easy. It's like so accessible that it's like, I don't need to make a thing of it. I'll just watch it whenever. And I just never got to it. So that's kind of it's not like I didn't want to see this movie. I just like it's just like kind of there.
Yeah, we actually had a good conversation. We both agreed that we wanted to see it, but kind of needed someone to force us to just prioritize
Yeah.
it. So thanks again to our Patreon member, Jessica, because this is what we needed. And I'm also traveling, so it was a great time to watch a movie. I needed something to watch, which I think is something I wanted to share as well that has to do with my review of Strange World. Do we want to just jump in?
Yeah, let's go for
Jump into the pit that takes us to the weird strange world. Okay,
it.
so it took me 3 viewings to get through this movie, and it wasn't because any one thing was horrible. It just couldn't capture my attention. So I'll start with where I went wrong. So I watched the first maybe 25 minutes on my iPad on the airplane. And I knew from just on the iPad, it was beautiful, like beautifully animated. It just wasn't really getting sucked in. And then I paused, then I continued watching it from my laptop, which is just slightly bigger than an iPad. And it was kind of getting the same vibe. Then I stopped again about halfway through. Didn't realize the movie seemed long because when I paused it, it said I still had like another 70 minutes or something. I was like, what? And then what I ended up doing was we transferred to an Airbnb where they have Disney Plus, and I just had to log in. Very, very convenient. And now I'm watching it on like a 65-inch HD TV, made the difference. I was
Ah,
now more immersed and paying attention. And also, the second half of the movie is a lot more interesting than the first half. So I'll start there. Like, that's how I watched it. What was your viewing experience like?
I mean, I watched it at home on, I think I have a 55-inch TV. So
Nice,
from the
nice.
get-go, 55, 4K, all that stuff. But so it was beautiful. However, I think you and I are very opposites when it comes to what keeps our attention span.
Yeah.
And for me, when it's more of the like story type of stuff, I get interested. And then when it's all the action, I lose interest. So like the second half of the movie, I was like, what's going on? There's like so much
Yeah.
happening that I was like kind of just like zoning out and not paying a lot of attention. Also, I'm sick, so like my attention span is very dwindled at the moment. But yeah, I tend to like kind of zone out when things get too busy
Yeah.
on a TV. And so
I think
pretty
that
funny. We
that's
probably absorbed opposite sections of the
yeah.
film.
And it's really good context to how we're looking at this particular film. So I'll start with my rating and then let's like keep diving in. So my Mike
Okay.
TV rating for this is there's two parts to it. It was 2 stars, 2 out of 5 stars. And then after going down the rabbit hole of understanding where the movie came from, who was behind it, what happened during production, all the things where I love to go down the YouTube and Reddit rabbit holes, that
Hmm.
bumped it up to about a 3.5 stars.
Oh, okay.
So I was more excited learning more and more about this strange movie than the movie itself, which is what it is, and that's why we're Disneyholics. Sometimes the fans out there who do all the research make some content even more exciting.
Yeah, that's such a I never do these dives like you do. I should start because it's hard for me to realize though that like the actual content is not appealing, but the background story that they don't serve to you is. And so
Yeah.
it's like, how do we get that in the actual, you know what I
there was
mean?
a
Like, how do
point
we
where
combine that?
there was a point where I wasn't going to finish the second half at all and just come show up to the podcast ashamed, because I was more interested in just stopping it and being like, what the hell is going on? How did this film get made? Why does it feel like 100 other movies? So I wanted to learn so much about the backstory before even finishing the movie. I'm glad I finished it. Um,
Okay.
so one thing that stood out to me was in the third act, there was a huge kind of plot twist and reveal that completely made me like the movie way more because it changed what it was and became
Mm-hmm.
more interesting and weird. And spoiler alert, it's the part where they make it to the other side of the mountain only to discover that the place they lived this whole time, their version of, it's not really called Earth, it's like wherever they live, is actually on the back of this giant turtle-like creature on a planet, an ocean planet. And they turn around and they see the eyeball of it, which is probably, the eyeball is probably as large as like a city or something. And they're just a little tiny dot looking at the eyeball. And they had this realization that they were inside of a giant living organism the whole time they were exploring this underground world. And that just blew my mind. I was like, what? I wasn't expecting it. It's very like stoner friendly. Like I was like, what? Who thought of that? Like that pushed it up a notch from feeling like a regular Journey to the Center of the Earth adventure movie. Because I was like, okay, there's something different. Then it started getting more into the sort of like save the planet, Fern Gully, climate change thing, and healing and
Hmm.
working with. And so it's like, okay, I get it, I get it. And so I start to like it more when the third act started because it kind of flipped a bit. What did you think about that change, twist?
Yeah. That's where I was like, kind of like, wait, what? There's now we have like it's almost like Inception, right? It's like
Yes.
there's a world inside of a world inside of a world. Like, okay, now we're like getting pretty deep in here. And it really threw off their entire plans, right?
Yeah.
Because they realized like, wait, we have it all wrong. Um, and I was trying to relate that back to like our real life Earth and whatnot, and I couldn't really do it. So I was a little stuck on that thought for a little too long, I think. Um,
Same. And then even afterward, where I got it to in my crazy brain was, in an eye, I went even weirder than they did. In an eyeball, when you go close, there's like those little things floating around.
yeah.
So I thought, what if Earth is that? Like, we're not even the pupil. We're not even special enough at all. What if we're just like this floating thing in this ginormous organism's eyeball? And then I went even further and I was like, what if that squiggly thing was just our galaxy and we're even smaller into that? And then, yeah, my mind was blown. It reminds me of a scene from Men in Black Part One at the very end, where they zoom out of Earth to show that we're actually in a galaxy, which is in a universe that's in a glass marble and a game of marbles that these giant aliens are playing and throwing on the floor.
Oh my
And I
gosh.
was like, what? So yeah, I like that stuff. I thought it was weird and cool. And yeah, it gets you thinking about your own existence for a
Yeah.
second. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was
It's
cool.
pretty, it's very strange in a trip
Very
because it's
strange.
supposed to be like that, right? Yeah.
I also did some research for us. So let's jump into that too. So I think we mentioned
Sure.
earlier, Strange World came out in November 2022. The cast is a pretty good cast. So you have Jake Gyllenhaal as one of the main characters. His name is Searcher Clade. He has a son who's one of the main characters. Actor is Jabuki Young White, uh, who plays Ethan Clade, the first ever openly gay Disney main character. So that alone is so great. And it was just like this movie just flew under the radar. So no one even really celebrated that. But that was pretty cool. I was like,
I
okay,
didn't even think about that part of it, about the movie not being very popular and having that much of an impact on that section of it.
yeah, kind of a bummer. You had Dennis Quaid playing the grandpa slash dad, Jaeger Clade, Jaeger.
Oh.
Gabrielle Union, love her. She played the mother, Meridian Clade. So now, not only did we have a gay son, we had an interracial marriage. So you had the black mom, the white
Hmm.
dad, and then the mixed kid. Loved that. So these are all like the checklist of things that I would have ran to the theaters for. So I just don't get what happened here.
Yeah.
You had Lucy Liu playing Callisto, who was like the kind of butch Asian adventurer, sergeant, all that kind of stuff. Um, then a lot of other random voices for some of the smaller characters. For example, Alan Tudyk, who plays the goat in Wish, and a lot of other characters. His voice was in this. And then the director's name is Don Hall, not to be confused with Don Hahn,
Fun. Yeah.
who I know you really like.
Yes.
But Don Hahn was involved before Don Hall came on to direct. And this is where
Oh,
it
okay.
gets very interesting.
Oh.
So Don Hahn, what you tell a little bit about Don Hahn. You know him a little bit more than I
Uh,
do. He produced Lion King, right? And some like a
yeah,
lot of
he
those.
was a lot involved in a lot of the Renaissance films, and like he's also like a big Disneyholic is why I really love him, because he's like such a fan and he gets really involved with other projects as well, like curating um galleries at the Walt Disney Family Museum, and he created that documentary about Howard Ashman. So he's
Oh,
like
yeah.
he's just such a really he's like a really empathetic, charismatic person. So like he's just great. And then he's also, been a producer for a million years. So he just has a lot of his hands in a lot of Disney work that is
We saw
very
him
important to all of
once,
us.
right? At a expo or something.
I've seen him a lot of times. I don't remember if I've seen him with you, maybe. Probably
So,
I'm sure he's always at the D23 Expo, but I can't remember for sure.
well, the way you describe Don is perfect for the background of this movie.
Okay.
So he also produced Atlantis, The Lost Empire, which this was giving me Atlantis vibes, just modern, like CG versus hand drawn. And that was a Disney movie that also flew under the radar, no music, very adventure focused. And I don't think did very well. So there's that context. Now, when he was asked about these type of movies that he produces that are not Lion King, that are not fairy tale princesses, his analogy was this. He said, I like to produce a range of Disney, magical Disney films. So he says, imagine walking into Disneyland and you're at the hub. I like to turn left first. When I turn left first, I'm thinking of Atlantis and Strange World, Indiana Jones, all of that stuff, or the Rescuers. And then he goes, then you go straight ahead in the hub. That's where you're going to get your princess movies and your musicals, yada yada. So I like the way that he
How
described that,
cute.
right?
That's great.
I was like, okay, that makes sense because I sometimes get confused why they randomly throw in the adventure movies and then I'm waiting for like the next princess movie. But and maybe not everybody is. So maybe some people were waiting for something like this. He had described Adventureland as an area full of hidden danger, wild creatures, and very few songs. So
Ah,
that was his mindset going into both Atlantis and then eventually Strange World. And so he and the director, once the director came on board and the writers, they said they were inspired by pulp fiction, not the movie, but the old kind of pulp comic. So
okay,
things
I was
like,
like, what?
yeah, like Journey to the Center of the Earth, for example, which this kept giving me that vibe for sure. And then even in the, especially the first half of the movie, they showed a lot of those kind of books and they would turn into the animation and then turn into the real animation. Like those posters, there's a lot of this vibe in Up as well, which is a Pixar film. But when Carl has thinks about stuff, he thinks of it in that way, this pulp adventure. So that's
Mhm.
what they were trying to do. And then because filmmakers and producers love their analogies, it helps them sell the movie to get budget. They said, okay, let's make Journey to the Center of the Earth, but with a National Lampoon's Family Vacation comedy happening on top of it.
What the heck? Okay.
So all of these things again are like, all right, all right. But I don't know, it just didn't hit. But those things are cool. Like I get what he was trying to do. Personally, I don't think they nailed it because I think it was almost way too familiar to those things. Like I knew exactly what was going to happen up until the eyeball part, but it was like, okay, this
Right.
is going to happen. It's going to happen. They're going to find the dad, blah, blah, blah. And the whole there's a lot of father son drama, which again is great. We don't see that enough, but it was pretty predictable because we've seen it like in live action movies where the son doesn't want to follow the footsteps of the father. And then that creates conflict. And then you go another generation higher, and now you have a grandfather who connects with the son. And then you have the dad, the middle generation, feeling left out. So that was like, I felt like the core of the story. And for me, wasn't enough. It was more about that than the actual adventure. But that's
Right.
what I think they were trying to do. That was the point. So I really hope that it found its audience, even if it was a small audience. I think there's an audience out there that really connected well with it. And actually, Rotten Tomatoes has a fresh score, both audience and critics. So it goes back to box office and then just people like not caring about it. But there must have been a small group that of audience that loved it. I think so. I hope so. What do you think?
Right. I mean, I enjoyed it. I didn't feel like even after watching it, I didn't feel like it was something that's going to resonate with me. It could be also because of the things you're mentioning. Like I didn't have those kind of relationships that were in the film. So it might not be relatable for me exactly. But there's also some things that I felt were a little off. Like they they talked about there was this moment at the very beginning where the God, I don't even know how to say these generations. The main character, the dad, right? He's like the dad of Ethan.
Yeah,
He saw
Searcher.
a statue of his dad and he immediately spout out like a bunch of childhood trauma. Like he was like blah 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 blah. Like he just like word vomited out this like really traumatic experience. And so I was like, okay, that's obviously going to come back. But then when they ran into each other in the strange world, it was kind of like, oh, hey, like it wasn't like I don't know, it wasn't like, I thought there was going to be crying and like all this emotion and it just wasn't. And it was kind of weird to me. Like I felt like they didn't need to spat out the trauma at the beginning if they weren't going to address it later.
Yeah,
Do you know
I
what I
think
mean?
that's a good point. I think they made the mistake of trying to save it for the end when they were all three fighting, but then it doesn't make
Yeah.
sense because they should have addressed it right away for sure.
Right. It was definitely awkward for me to watch. I was like, okay, this is not the reaction I was expecting. So there's some twists and turns through the relationships that weren't residing with me. Like they're just kind of like, that's not how real life would feel, I don't think. But then
Yeah,
all of us are individuals and unique, and who knows what that felt like to them. But
very
it
true.
was
And
very
it
weird.
it took a while for the dad to even recognize the son. It doesn't look that different, but it is what it is.
Right. Yeah.
That happens a lot in movies where you just have to be like, okay, they don't know Superman is Clark Kent. Fine, just accept it.
Fine. Yeah. It's like
Fine.
the same exact person.
It didn't feel Disney to me, the movie itself. Like anything, the aesthetic, the writing, the dialogue, the twists and turns. It didn't feel like any particular studio. Like in my mind, I was like, oh, this is DreamWorks. Actually, no, it's not. Maybe this feels like Pixar. No, not really. What about Blue Sky, like the Ice Age people? So I don't know where it fits in, but it didn't feel like Disney magic to me. And then I had to check myself and realize, okay, what films has Walt Disney Animation Studios released? What era are we in? Right. So take away Pixar, take away Marvel, and just Walt Disney Animation Studios. Recently, they've given us things like Big Hero 6, Zootopia, um, Wreck-It Ralph 1 and 2. And then I start to realize, okay, this actually fits into that era, which I don't love.
Mm,
It's not the best era. Like there's a certain type of eyeball that they use that's very different than like the princess eye that we're used to. And even the grandpa, played by Dennis Quaid, was pretty much a Wreck-It Ralph reskinned. He looked just like Ralph, and they just put more hairy and olderness on. They aged him up a
true.
little bit, but he had the same
True.
arms and fists, like that aesthetic. And so I kept seeing Wreck-It Ralph in there, and some like Zootopia looking things. So I guess what I'm saying is I shouldn't have been surprised about the aesthetic of the film if I'm paying attention to what has been released. Like we're in a different era. We're even past sort of the tangled Frozen era too. We're in this weird era of Disney animation. Also, they have other
Right.
studios now, so Pixar can do their own thing. But when you boil it down to what has Walt Disney Animation Studios released, it's been a little bit weird. And then even when you and I watched Wish in theaters together, there were points where I love the animation, but it looked weird. It just looked different. And now you put all these together, and it's like, okay, there's this group of movies that's now been released in the 20 teens and the 2020s that are their own beast and their own aesthetic, I guess.
Are we becoming old curmudgeon
We
Disneyholics
are, we
now?
are. I miss the Disney eye. Like I love the Disney eye that started with our. No wonder when it started with the Golden Renaissance or whatever. Like Ariel's eyeball, and that type of eyeball stayed through most characters all the way to Frozen, even in CG form. It's like this
Right.
big eye. It's very pretty.
That's
It
funny.
makes sense.
I
Yeah.
thought you meant eye as in like what they're like the lens they're looking through, but you're like literally mean an
Oh
eyeball,
yeah,
like
the
what type of
literal
eye.
eyeball design of the eyeballs. Yeah, of the characters' faces. Now they all look like Wreck-It Ralph. And
Yeah, I see that.
it is what it is. Pixar's even trying new things. I know the reason why I still haven't seen Luca was because they completely changed their aesthetic to like look more like Aardman films, claymation, and not the Pixar look, and that threw me off. So yeah, I guess I'm just a curmudgeon.
Well, I'm curious to see if these resonate with the younger generation because to me, like those older films, like they had such a bigger message to them, and like the stuff I wanted out of Strange World, it had the capabilities for it and it had a storyline for it, and then they just didn't address a lot of the stuff I was hoping for and expecting because that's where, where the story
Yeah,
felt like it was leading like their usual tropes, but I wonder why they're not. And also if it still gets the same feel for the younger generation, like maybe it's just what they're into versus us. I don't know. Like, is it
yeah.
less trauma for the younger generation than us, or what? What's going on here?
And the younger gen, I want to say, the younger generation. prefer streaming most of the time. So in my research, it turns out this film did really well once it got to Disney Plus in terms of
Oh,
viewership.
okay.
So people were streaming it, and maybe yeah, that's that group that liked it, the younger group. But I think you're spot on with it. It had all of the ingredients for to make a classic film. It just didn't hit. I don't know why.
It's like
And
they would get
yeah,
to it and then they would just turn around and talk about something else. I'm like, no, like go there.
yeah,
What are you doing?
yeah. I was watching a fan review on YouTube of this, and he said he loves the world they built and would love to see either a series or something at the same quality, right?
Right.
And just set in that world, but not about any of the tropes or common storylines they used in this movie. He's like, what they built was such a beautiful world and lore, and there's so much more to uncover about this place they live on. But what would it look like if they were just having regular day to day, maybe relationship issues, things like that? So yeah, I could see that. That's how I felt exactly about Pixar's Onward. It's exactly that. I loved the
Right.
world. I didn't care for the story, but I wanted to see more of that place with all the cool stuff. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe this Strange World has a life on as a Disney series at some point because they saw the streaming numbers were high. I'm not sure, but the other part that, in terms of ingredients, is I don't think this movie helped. Um, like all the people who complain about like woke Disney and they comment everywhere, everything
Uh-huh.
diverse. This movie didn't help because I felt like some of it was forced. And I'm usually very honest if I feel like it was or wasn't. I felt it was a bit forced because the storyline about the son having a crush on his friend, who's a guy,
Uh-huh.
very cute. He had like highlight blonde highlights. It's very cute.
You reminded
Um,
me of Jerry.
totally. Yep, exactly. Same hair and everything. I feel like that could have been pulled out of the movie and nothing would have changed. I don't know why they added that at all. Like, and
Oh,
it kept coming up a lot. They're like, oh, just
interesting.
wait till, and he had like a cool name, wait till so and so sees you now or whatever. But I didn't get what that relationship and him getting the guy to like him had anything to do with the movie. And then there was one point where they, I guess it's optimistic, where the grandfather was getting to know his grandson and he immediately said, do you have a special someone in your life? What's his name? I thought that was weird because in real life, you would say either their name or ask, like, boy or
Did he really
girl.
say what's his name?
Yeah. And so, yeah, here's a moment where you think it's amazing, but it just was so unrealistic that I thought, oh, the woke people are going to scream. Especially if I'm already like uncomfortable with how
How funny.
unrealistic that was.
I didn't catch that. That's a little weird. Um, because I remember that scene because I was like expecting the grand like when he said like in my memory because I obviously wasn't paying enough attention, but like I thought he said like what's their name? And then the boy said a boy's name and I was expecting the grandpa to be like, "What? He?" or something like be surprised. And
Right.
I was actually proud that he wasn't surprised that it
Mhm.
was a boy. So I was like, okay. So like throughout the whole movie, like there wasn't any big like pushback or like any big drama around it being a boy. And I'm like, that's kind of cool. I like that they didn't have to address that further, but then they have that representation in it. So I like that part, but I could see how the woke police would get in there and be crazy. But
Yeah, yeah, and that's perfectly it. Like that, those were ingredients that I was not expecting, and was so happy to see how everything was normalized. And then,
yes,
especially
it's
when
just like normal.
you realize it's not Earth, it's this fictional land. It's like, okay, they're cooler over there. They're more inclusive in this fictional land. So maybe that's where it's coming from, because that scene happened, I think, before. I'm not sure you found out, but yeah, the he thing threw me off. But it's something we should all celebrate. It just goes back to like the delivery and execution,
Yeah.
like does it work?
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so that was interesting. I want to celebrate the diversity, Did it feel forced at times? To me, I would say yes, which unfortunately doesn't help us push back against the woke police.
Yeah. I feel like sometimes the big picture of it is just like get it in their face, whatever, deal with it, and then at some point you'll get used to it, hopefully.
Yeah.
Cross your fingers. God.
I liked the creatures. So we got to see it is Strange World. So the animators got to design whatever they could imagine. And eventually you find out the character designs are a combination of sort of ocean weird space creatures mixed with actual parts of a living organism. And it starts to click once you figure that out. It's like, oh, those did look like cells, blood cells. Oh, those did look like a virus that's trying to do this and that.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so that was pretty cool, like the way they had that. But it just took too long to get there. I was already disinterested by the
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
I remember I was kind of zoning out, getting all the action stuff. I was like, what? And then when they discovered that this actual biome, I'm like, okay, did we just like turn on the magical school bus? Right? That
Yeah. Oh
like
yeah.
or Body
Totally.
Wars or something. Like
Body
it was like all of a
Wars,
sudden, yeah,
Magic School Bus, Inner
like what just
Space.
happened is completely swapped over. But the characters also were giving me like Dolly. They were giving me Avatar. Like they're definitely like something that's familiar but just off a little bit, right? Or like Star Trek. I always thought Star Trek does that, where they have like an alien
Yeah.
that just has a crinkled nose. I'm like, okay, whatever.
And then you have like those big non-speaking creatures that walk by that are like giant in scale. Like it was kind of like a Jurassic Park moment when they saw one of these AT-AT looking organisms walking by,
Mhm.
which is another inspiration. So the director and the creators, including Don Hahn and Hall, said that when they were in the concept art phase, they were inspired by Miyazaki films. So they said,
Oh,
what would it look like to have a Disney character spin on some of his big films like Spirited Away that take place in this just weird world where you can't expect anything that's going to happen? And on some of the videos that you look, if you go on YouTube and see some of the behind the scenes, the concept art does look like Miyazaki. Like I was very
I was just say
impressed.
this film does not feel it. Now I have to go look at
Yeah.
the
I
concept art.
think once you put it into CG, it loses
Yeah, very
what
true.
makes the right those Japanese films so special, the craft behind it. But yeah, so again, I see where they're trying to go and I really appreciated it, but yeah, just not for me. And I hope the fact that it didn't do well does not deter them for continuing to try with the inclusion stuff. So we did see in Wish, whether you like the movie or not, it was pretty inclusive. And I'm really hoping for Frozen 3 that Elsa gets her moment and is comes out and falls in love with that lady in the forest that's already kind
Hell
of her
yeah,
partner.
especially someone that big. Like
Yeah,
Elsa is like top tier right now
right.
and
And the
has
kid,
been.
she's already part of people's brains and nostalgia that it's too late. You can't even protest it because she's Elsa's already out there. And if you
Yeah.
don't, every time you see her, if you're mad, oh well, too bad for you. Also, Idina Menzel, the voice of Elsa, has said it multiple times that she hopes that that could be the case for
Oh,
that
really?
character.
How
Yeah.
cool. Aw,
So there you go. Get that.
that'd be awesome.
Strange world.
I have another couple things I wanted to mention about it. First of all, Splat is like the main Strange World character, right? That kind of hangs out with Ethan most of the film. He was giving me straight up BB-8 vibes.
Oh, like the way he rolled, especially. I didn't think of that until you said that now. I like that.
And his little
He
noises he made, and he would like do a thumbs up and like all the little pointing. That was like very BB-8, right?
That's cute.
Um, he
I
gave
could see
me
that
his
for sure.
vibes.
I was getting just a lot of generic sidekick vibes from him, like
Very true.
like the uh the generic non-speaking sidekicks, like the ones
Yeah,
that get
yeah.
Pocahontas, and sometimes they like find them, like BB-8. Ray found BB-8 in this in the next act of the film. In Frozen 2, they find that little newt, what I don't know what it's called.
Uh-huh.
Reminding me of that. Yeah, so a lot of like plug and play paint by number
Yeah, yeah.
characters and storylines here.
Yeah, I wasn't in love with him because of that, I think. Like he was cute, but it was just like, okay, I've seen him so many times,
Yeah.
like
And
endless amount of times.
I hate when you can tell they want us to think, oh, it's the cute character. I'm like, no,
Yeah, yeah.
it's not working.
No, no.
Nope.
Need to come
Just
up with something a little more unique here,
blue
okay?
blobby
Keep us
thing with
interested.
hands. Yep.
Um, Also, can we just talk about like what they were going for with this intentional branding? Did you notice what Strange World, like the logo looks like?
Like Indiana Jones type of thing.
Exactly like Indiana
Yeah.
Jones. Like it might, it's a very similar font. It's the color scheme, the like red faded to yellow, like the, what's that called? When you go through like different gradients.
Uh,
Ooh, there's a word for it.
gradient. I was gonna say
Yeah, but there's another word. But anyway,
the one for hair. What
um,
is that one called?
and
Ombre.
even the way it's like drawn, like where it's like big S and then it has a small E, like it's a kind of like in a like a arc, and it goes like
Yeah.
the smaller letters at the end. It's exactly like Indiana Jones, and I'm like, okay, there. What was the intention there? It was like, okay, this is an
So
adventure film. We need to nail that in.
that came from, so they were both inspired by the same source materials. Think of it that way. Indiana Jones and tons of other movies, but and Strange World were both inspired by those pulp magazines, which had the same exact font, all those type of things.
Oh, how
Like
funny. Okay.
bam, boom, pop out, like that. Like that was the thing at the time. Like Strange. There was one too that was Disney. It wasn't even that old. It was like Weird Tales of the Haunted Mansion or something. There's like this certain aesthetic and design that comes with that world of those magazines at the time. But
Mm,
yeah.
okay. Well, they nailed it because it was like,
Yeah.
huh.
But it
But it was
didn't feel
also
Disney, right? That font didn't feel Disney, which is what threw me off too.
no, no.
I was like, "Ah, I don't want this. Get it.
Yeah, it's like there's all these films coming out just kind of like, oh, okay, it's another one of these random one-off films. That's what they feel like, right?
Yes.
Um,
And imagine being or working and you're the producer director. How do you respond to an executive who goes, okay, I screened your movie. It doesn't feel Disney.
yeah,
Like that, but that must be so annoying. But it just doesn't. But it's hard to pinpoint every single thing. It's just in there. I don't know.
I feel like watching a lot of RuPaul's Drag Race recently, like I can totally see that conversation happening. Like, but what's gonna make it like stick? What's gonna make you stand out? Like they had to have that conversation. I think they skipped it. But yeah, so it's giving me Indiana Jones vibes, Salvador Dali a lot
Yeah,
with the
yes. Like the
creatures.
melting, the way they would move, like
And
ooh.
those big long-legged creatures, those are
Yeah.
very Dolly-esque. And SEA. So this is another like adventure film that we could have like tied into SEA somehow. That could have been really fun too.
Yeah.
Um,
There were moments where I was
Even
like, oh, this is perfect. If it did well, they may have.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Who knows? Oh yeah, maybe they're just kind of like lightly peppering it in to see if how it would do, and then they could tie it all in together. That'd be funny.
Oh, you know what else? And this is a strange comment for animated film, but I didn't feel any chemistry between the mom and dad. So
Oh
Jake
really?
Gyllenhaal and Gabrielle Union. Yeah, I felt maybe it's the animation style felt a bit hollow, like they were two cartoons. Whereas I think of like Pixar, who does that um, chemistry really well. Like in Pixar, let's think of like The Incredibles. I completely believe that Mr. and Mrs. Incredible have been married for like 30 years. Just their banter, the way they look at each other, the way that they're animated next to each other.
Huh.
I wasn't
I
getting that
totally
as
got
much with these
different
two.
on that. I felt like they were like
Okay.
super in love and very cute.
Oh, they did do a lot of physical stuff like kissing and hugging. I don't know, just didn't work on me for some reason.
Huh.
But I think maybe I'm getting caught up on it was the animation style, probably.
Maybe, maybe. Also speaking of at the very beginning of the film, going back to Indiana Jones, they had this whole sequence that reminded me so much of the Indiana Jones Q or Indiana Jones Adventure Q video, where they're like walking you through the
Yeah.
safety stuff and like the story of the ride. They kind of had that vibe at the beginning of this movie too. I was like, this is a trip. It's reminding me of a Disneyland attraction. So that was kind of fun.
Ooh, that's what Don Han wanted to turn left to go to Adventureland.
There you go.
So
Oh,
yeah,
I
there you
love
go.
that. I love that so much. And you see that interview with him. And then my last thing I wanted to mention was the soundtrack. So definitely no songs came out of this where it's like stuck in my head, earworm status. However, I liked it. I felt I was getting very much Indiana Jones, Jurassic Park, Star Wars kind of vibes, like
Yeah,
John Williams-esque soundtrack, right? And it was very fitting for this movie, so I was enjoying that. But my favorite part was when they were in their home, they played an electro swing song, and I was like, "What? I don't think I've ever thought an electro swing song would make it into a Disney film." So that made me very happy. I was like, "Okay, they're like trying new things with this music. All right."
that was cool. I do like that. It shows too that goes back to that it's a different era. We have different group of people making the movies.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, the Star Wars stuff, I saw it too, even in the editing. So you could tell they are inspired by that type of movie with the crossfade and sometimes even the
Oh yes,
circle.
there was so many of the transitions. Yep.
Very George
And I
Lucas.
swear there was a Millennium Falcon sound effect at one point. I
Oh,
rewound it and listened to it again. And I was like, they
I
had the
believe
Millennium
it.
Falcon
I
sound in it.
believe it.
Yep.
Basically, everything I was reading in the research and the reviews were, oh, maybe this is also what happened to Disney Wish. It was so inspired by things that existed that it didn't hit. So, but everything I read, they're like, oh yeah, it's inspired by this and the Star Wars this and blah blah blah. So they just put too much in, but it definitely comes through. So they nailed
It
it in
did,
that
yeah.
way, I guess. Yeah.
Yep. All right, so what is your final review of this film?
Final review is it changed again. I said it went from a 2 to a 3.5 after the
Uh-huh.
rabbit hole. After this conversation, I'm gonna bring it back down to a 3.
Ooh, ouch.
Like
Usually
a
our
solid
conversations
3.
make it go up.
Yep. It's a solid 3. Like it did what it was supposed to do. It wasn't horrible. There was nothing like truly messed up about it. It just was fine.
Yeah,
And these days you have to be more than that to be memorable. There's just so much out there that is you're competing with.
it's
Like,
true.
who knew that Puss in Boots movie was going to make so much money? That came out of left field. Back in the day, Disney wasn't really competing with anyone. It was like, oh, what's the next big Disney movie? Eventually, Pixar came along, they bought them, and then DreamWorks came along. So now there's a lot of competition. So you have to really stand out.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. And there's been a cluster of tons of media coming out after COVID, right? It's like kind of all pouring
Yeah,
in. So there's so much to pay attention to and so much to rate it against versus something to be excited about for a few months with nothing else to compare it to, you know? So
yeah.
it is a little tough. I would say I'd give it like a 2.5.
Okay.
But I feel it's like just coasting right in the middle. Like
Yeah.
I would recommend it. It's a good watch. However, it's not anything like, oh my God, but it's just like good. So
There is
don't
one thing
expect too much and
that I
don't expect
learned
too less.
when doing the YouTube videos is that they used an aesthetic that I didn't know how to name. So you know how there's steampunk? I think you and I really like that style, steampunk.
Uh-huh.
So people don't know that's like futuristic, but also industrial. A good example is that restaurant that looks like Willy Wonka's at Universal Orlando, like steampunked
Right.
out. I think
Thinking
Epic
like Jules
Mickey
Verne.
was just steampunk. One of those games? Jules Verne. Yeah, there's a whole land in Tokyo Sea that's very steampunk. So the design here on the surface level of not the surface level metaphorically, but the actual surface level where they lived and they had all their cool spaceships and stuff, they call that solar punk. So it's
Oh,
like steampunk, but it's powered by more modern energy versus coal.
interesting.
Yeah, I was
And I
like,
wonder
okay.
what is that compared to like cyberpunk?
Ooh, yeah, more digital, I think the cyberpunk would be.
The colors are definitely cyberpunk colors. That's funny.
Yeah, it's a cool. I was like, okay, all right, solar punk, and I did like that. Like the cool spaceships they had were interesting. The way that it would use this kind of renewable energy source of those plants instead of gas or coal. I thought, okay, that's something,
That is something.
but something.
All right,
Yeah.
that's a little something, something. All right. So, do you have any other final thoughts on Strange World before we wrap up today?
Um, The only thing I could think of is, if anyone hasn't seen it and you're looking to Jen and us, the Disneyholics, for a recommendation, I would say watch it so that you could see where Disney is going, how far they've come, where they still need to go. And I think it's just weird enough that it may be referenced from time to time in the future, not very often, but the same way we reference like Atlantis or Black Cauldron now and then, it'd be fun to be part of that and say you watched it. So for those reasons, I would say I'd recommend watching it.
I love that. All right. Well, today we reviewed Strange World in depth, and we talked about a couple other fun things. And happy Valentine's Day. Once again, everyone, I really hope it's a lovely day for everybody.
Happy
And
V
yeah,
Day. Thank you all for listening. And we hope you enjoyed episode 176 of the Disneyholics Show.
follow us on social media at the Disneyholics.
And if you want to get in touch, send us a DM on Instagram or contact us at thedisneyholics.com.
Okay, bye.
Bye.